Practice classes in JavaScript with a mini battle game project. You will need to use the skills from the previous video. So in this project, you have a one button attack, and if I click it, you see a log in the console. So player attacked enemy HP is 90, and enemy attacked player, so player HP is 100. And if I continue clicking this button, you will see how the HP bar goes down until the enemy is dead. This is the basic setup that we have. This is our HTML file, and it will use style.css and script.js files. So style.css right now is pretty simple, and I think that you can understand here everything. So here we have font family, some colors, basic alignment, and also we have cursor to pointer. So when I hover over attack, you see that the cursor changes to the pointer. And also we have a text alignment, which is center. So this is a shorthand. Instead of writing display flags and then justify content center, you can write text align center for the text. And I also have fancy.css. This is a complex CSS that makes this game much more attractive. Eventually, when you finish with your JavaScript, you can switch the style.css to fancy.css. And in this case, you will see this fancy look of a simple game. But we will not go into details how fancy.css works, so you can just download it from the link in the description. Right now, I return back to style.css, and now we can be focused on our JavaScript file. So JavaScript has a default class unit with 3 properties, name, HP, and damage. And then you have 6 to-do comments that you need to implement. During this video, I will explain you what a certain to-do means, and then you need to try implementing it your own. And after that, we will implement it together. So let's start from the first to-do. Here you see that you need to implement player and enemy objects using the unit class. For that, you need to create 2 variables, player and enemy. And then you need to use our class for implementing these units. For the HP and damage, you can put whatever parameters you want. Let's start from the creating the player. So I write const player equal to new unit, and then I have 3 parameters that I need to fill: name, HP, and damage. So for the HP, I choose the number 110, and for the damage, I choose the number 10. You can choose other numbers if you want. And let's do the same with the enemy. In my case, enemy has 100 HP and 10 damage. So the first to-do is implemented. Now let's continue with the second one. In the second to-do, you need to get HTML elements, and in the parentheses, you see the exact elements that you need to get. So what we see in the web is just an HTML. And in JavaScript, we need to access all these elements separately. So what we need to access? During our game, we want to access player HP, enemy HP, and also we want to set our trigger to the attack button. So if you look to our HTML, you will find all these elements. So let's start from the HP, and now you can see that inside of the p tag, we have a new span tag. So what it means? So span tag is just a helper in HTML for accessing the number HP that is inside of the p tag. For example, if I delete it, you will not see any changes. But in this case, I need to access an entire string, so an entire p tag with the static part HP column. But there is only one thing that changes, so the number, player HP. And this is the reason why I put a span tag with the ID player HP. So now we can access this element in JavaScript, and then we can update it. So the same I have with the HP tag for our enemy. Almost in the end of this file, I have a new p tag with the ID log. Currently this is empty, but we can write something. And now you see that when we add a text to this p tag, it is displayed on our page. So we also need to access this tag because we want to write different messages when user clicks on the attack button. So for example, we want to write that player attacks enemy and enemy attacks player. Now try implementing the second step using getElementById methods. At first, I access HP spans. So I write const player HP is equal to document.getElementById, and now I need to provide this ID. Let's look to our index.html file, and here you see that span contains the ID player HP. So here I will write this ID. Now let's do the same for the enemy HP. Now I also need to check the ID in the HTML. So I see that for enemy HP, I'm using enemy-HP ID. Then I'm accessing the button. Button has this ID, so let's just copy and paste it. And the last element is our log. Now let's continue with the third step, where you need to implement the battle logic. So for that, you will write a function battle that will access our player and decrease the HP of the player by the damage of the enemy. And then you need to decrease the HP of the enemy based on the damage of the player. But you shouldn't access elements from the class directly. So for that, you need to write getters and setters. Now let's implement this step. I will write getters for our HP and damage, and also the setter for our HP. And now let's write the function battle. So this function will not get any parameters, and it will access our player and enemy directly inside of the function. So at first, let's imagine that player hits the enemy first, so we need to decrease the HP of the enemy. And for that, I access the current HP of the enemy, and then I decrease the damage of the player. And now I need to do the same for the player. Now let's continue with the step number 4. Here you need to write a function that will update UI elements. UI means user interface, or simply all the elements that you see in the web. In the step number 1, we created 2 objects in JavaScript, and now we need to synchronize them with the HTML elements. So then in the step number 3, we have a function that can change our enemy and player objects. And then in the step number 4, you need to synchronize these changes with the HTML elements from the step number 2. Also, you see that we have a log element, so we need to write some kind of message, and for that you can add a return statement to the battle function, and in this case, if you call the function battle, it will also return you a message. And then you can use this message in the update UI function that will display this message in the web. So at first I create a new function, update UI. Now let's update our player HP element. For updating the text that HTML elements have, you have a text context property. And now I can assign this property to a new value. So now let's do the same for the enemy. And now let's update our log. So for example, I can write log.textContent is equal to message, but at this point we don't have any message. So let's pass this message to the function update UI. So now when I call this function, I can pass a message. So to test how it works, let's call this function. And now you see some changes on the web. So for example, the HP of our player have been updated to 110, and also we have a logging message attacked. So, but I don't want to manually write these messages. And as I said, let's write this message inside of the battle function. So in this function, let's create a new message and then let's return it. And then we can write that player attacked enemy, and then let's log a new HP. So for example, I write player attacked enemy, and then I write enemy HP column, and then I concatenate the dynamical value from the object enemy. And now let's extend the string on the next line. Now let's call the function battle and update UI to see how it works. So before the update UI function, let's call the battle function. And now you see that the HP of the player and the HP of the enemy have been changed. We still don't see any messages because we haven't stored this message from the battle function. So let's create a new variable message. So now this variable stores the data from the battle function, and now I can pass this variable to the update UI function. And now in the console you see two messages. Player attacked enemy, then the enemy HP, and also enemy attacked player, and then the player HP. Now let's continue with the step number 5. In this step you need to write the winning check function. If the HP of any unit is equal to 0, in this case we want to finish this game, and then write the message to the console that player is dead, or enemy is dead, or both are dead. So let's start from writing the winning check function. This function doesn't receive any parameters, but I want to send the message. So let's return a default message. I think that I want to return an empty string that represents that we don't have any winners. So before this return, let's check that player is dead. So if the player HP is less or equal to 0, in this case we can write that player is dead. Now let's check the same for the enemy. And now let's check that if player.getHP is less or equal to 0 and enemy.getHP is less or equal to 0, we return a message that both are dead. And now let's think what happens if both units are dead. So we are going to the first if, where the player HP is less or equal to 0, which is true, so we return the message that player is dead. And when we return a message, it means that we finish this function, so it means that we don't check all the remaining branches. And this is the reason why this check should be in the beginning. So now, if only player is dead, this function will give us false, and we will go to the next function. And then the second if statement gives true, so we return the message that player is dead. Let's also delete the calls of our battle and update UI functions. And now we can continue with the step number 6. In the last step, you need to write the function game loop. So this function needs to call all the functions that we wrote before in the right order. And then you need to write the trigger for our button. So when a user clicks the button attack, we need to call the function game loop. So at first, let's write a new function game loop. This function doesn't have any parameters, and as I said, we need to call all the remaining functions in the right order. So the first function that I want to call is a battle. So this function sets a new value for our HP and damage, and also it returns a message. So let's store the message that we received from the battle function. After updating our variables, I want to check if there is any winner. So I call the winning check function. This function also sends a message, so let's save it in a separate variable. And then I want to update the corresponding UI elements using the update UI function. So in this function we need to pass a message, but now I have two messages that I can pass. So we need to think about the logic, which message and when we show. So the winning message can also be empty. As you see from this function, the default return is empty. So I think that I want to show a battle message until someone is dead. And if someone is dead, I want to show the winning message. So let's write an if statement that if the winning message is equal to empty string, we want to pass battle message. And then I want to write the else statement. So if we have the winning message, I will pass the winning message. And finally, let's add a trigger to our attack button. So for that, we will use addEventListener function. So when the user clicks on the button, we call the game loop. And now let's check how it works. So now I see that player has 100 HP, but it should have 110 HP. So it means that our UI elements haven't updated yet. So let's also call update UI function. So now you see that our elements have been updated. And now if I click the attack button, you see that we have the message that player attacked enemy and enemy attacked player, and the HP of these units have been decreased. I can continue clicking. And at some point, I see that enemy is dead. But here I have one bug that even though that my enemy is dead, I can continue attacking my units and now they have negative HPs. But we can easily fix this bug by blocking our attack button if one of the units is dead. So in the game loop, we have the else statement, which means that our winning message is not empty. And here I will add a new line. Buttons in JavaScript have a default value of disabled that is equal to false, and then I can set it to true, and in this case, user won't be able to click this button. So let's test it again. And now you see that if the enemy HP is equal to 0, our button is disabled, and even though that I continue clicking on this button, our add event listener doesn't listen these clicks anymore. So you have implemented all 6 steps of this game, and now let's plug our fancy CSS. For that you need to download the fancy.css file from my GitHub. In the index.html, let's change the style.css. And now you see updated styles in the web. So if you click this button, you will see logs, and also you will see that the numbers are changing, but the HP bar remains on the same place. Let's add some lines for animating our HP bar. At first, go to the step number 1, and here you need to write 2 additional constants. So player max HP, which is equal to player.getHP, and then the enemy max HP, which is equal to enemy.getHP. So these variables stores the initial amount of HP of our units, and then we will use these variables in our animation. Now in the step number 2, you need to access 2 elements. So player bar and enemy bar. And finally, you need to add 2 additional lines to our update UI function. So the first line takes the width of our progress bar, and then it sets a new width by dividing the current HP to the maximum HP. And then we convert it to the percentages. So and the same with the enemy bar. And after making these changes, you have a fully implemented mini battle game project. So here you can click your attack until one of the enemies is dead. In the next video, we will start making a new big project where we will use all the knowledge that you have gained today.